On the morning of April 18, 1906, the Mint building here in San Francisco had its greatest test. On that morning at 5:12, San Francisco suffered an earthquake of an 8.2 magnitude on the Richter scale. It was the largest earthquake that had occurred in the United States as far as anyone could remember. And it shook San Francisco for a full minute. If you've never been in an earthquake, a 1-minute earthquake can seem like it lasts 15 minutes. As buildings around you shake, the grounds around you shake. This was such a strong earthquake in 1906 that when it was finished, railroad tracks looked like spaghetti. Buildings were slumped out in the street. Much of the siding on San Francisco's City Hall had fallen off and it looked like a crumbling Roman ruin. In addition, it broke gas mains and water mains. Many of those gas mains lit into fires. And here in this area, this part of San Francisco where the old San Francisco U.S. Mint is located, many of those fires grew together to create one massive conflagration. Now, San Francisco's fire department didn't have to summon its men to the fire stations. Those men instinctively knew what to do. They rushed to their fire stations. They loaded the fire trucks up. They wheeled the trucks out on the street. They headed toward the burning buildings in the South of Market area where the old Mint is located. They got in front of the burning buildings. They jumped off of their fire trucks. They connected the fire hoses to the fire hydrants. Then they pointed the nozzles of their hoses at the burning buildings. They turned on the fire hydrants, but nothing happened because the water mains had been broken and there was no water to fight the fire. And so over the next few hours, they saw all these fires grow together into one massive firestorm that started to eat away the entire neighborhood. Now, 50 Mint workers rushed to this building and they decided that they were going to see if they could save it from this massive firestorm that was headed towards the Mint. Now, normally that would have been a hopeless task because it was such a massive fire. But there was an incredible miracle had occurred. And that was they had just 2 weeks before completed a cistern system in the basement of the Mint that connected to an artesian well down below the building. And so they in fact had their own water source. And so they took the one single water hose that they had, they strung it up to the roof of the building, and as the fire got closer and closer to the Mint, they stood there with this one water hose. They watered down the building as hot cinders started to rain down on the Mint. Smoke was wafting in their faces, and the buildings right across the street erupted into flames, raising the temperature in the area hundreds and hundreds of degrees. And so for several hours, as this horrendous fire was raging all around the Mint workers took turns watering off the top of the buildings, putting the fire out anywhere that it started to start in the building, and also going inside to the Mint when it was needed, because the fire was so hot nearby that it melted the window panes on the top floors, which were not protected by the iron shutters. And there were flames of fire that were shooting through the windows of the Mint into the inside of the Mint. And so they would bring the hose down and they would spray off those flames that were coming down. In addition, the sandstone siding on the outside of the Mint grew so hot and it expanded so much that pieces of that sandstone started popping off the building, making explosive-like sounds as those pieces popped off. And if you can imagine what it must have been like for those men to hear the roar of the fire, the explosion of those pieces popping off, But they held their ground for several hours until finally the fire started to die down after it had burned all the buildings surrounding the mint and had moved on to other parts of the city. And so when it was safe, they opened the front doors of the mint, they stepped outside to a scene of utter devastation. Everywhere the city was just in rubbles. Then they turned around and they looked at the mint itself, and they saw it was blackened by soot and battered by flames, but there it was, still standing, still intact, and they had saved the 200 million in gold and silver coins and bullion in its basement. Now this was important not just to the government, which obviously wanted to retain all of the metals that were protected here, but it turned out it was incredibly important also to the city of San Francisco. And that's because all of the other banks in San Francisco had burned down, and so these banks did not have access to the currency and coins that they normally kept, much of which was in superheated safes that couldn't be opened because they were so hot. And so for the next few weeks, the Old Mint became an umbrella bank and made good on all the deposits from other banks and were able to hand out money to people for survival and rebuilding. And thus, the Old Mint was instrumental in San Francisco pulling itself back up after this utter devastation and helping the city rebuild into what it is today.